So first off, I'm going to start. So because the building the character rig is already recorded, there's an explanation for that. I'm not going to go through that part of the demo. I'm going to go open scene for a second and just show you the rig that I'm working with. So there's the Seaweed rig that I built. If you followed along with me, and let me show you in the outliner, and I'm going to go ahead and say shift left mouse button, click on that plus sign, which basically says, hey, open up the entire hierarchy there. Shift left mouse button, click on the plus sign, boom. This is what your Seaweed rig should look like if you built it the same as the demo. There should be a top node called Seaweed. Underneath that is Geo, and underneath that same top node is also one called Rig. So the Geo is under a separate branch than the Rig. And then you've got Rig with NURBS curve joint, NURBS curve joint, NURBS curve joint, NURBS curve joint, and then the end joint. And the base joint here is at that top of the branch. And then as you go your way down, you can see it moves up the branch. And the reason for doing it this way is so that when I grab the base control here and rotate it, you can see everything comes along for the ride. And then when I grab the next control and rotate it, everything comes along for the ride above that, and so on and so forth. So I'm using simple parenting to create the behavior of this rig that I want. That's the first thing. Now, one of the things that I can't remember if I did it in the demo when I recorded it, but that I would typically do for myself is I would take these controls that have, like you can see I did it here, rotate Y, all the other channels are hidden. I would hide the ones I'm not intending to use. So in this case, oh, it looks like I did actually. I kept the translates and only the rotate Y. So if I try and rotate it in any other axis, it won't allow me to do it. Okay, good. So anyway, that's what the rig looks like. Now I'm not going to animate directly on this rig file because you don't want to do that. What I want to do is I want to go File, New Scene, and don't save this one. And I'm going to go File, Save Scene As, and I'm going to call it Mature David SW. Now, for a submitted file, that's exactly what the name would be. For my own working files, I go V00 to indicate this is the file where I start and nothing's happened yet. And I'm just going to go File, Create Reference. And I'm going to go like this, say, reference in with that namespace, capital A. And I'm going to go to my assets and grab that Seaweed Rig and go reference. And then I'm going to go frame it up. And then I'm going to go panel, orthographic, I believe side view. And there we go. There's my side view. Check my framing here. Make sure it's nicely centered in the scene. Get the base right along the side there like that. Get as close as I possibly can. And I'm going to say, okay, lock that camera down because this is the view I'm going to be animating from. And then I can turn off that when I go to Play Blast. So the other thing I'm going to do is show none. I only want to see the polygons and the NURBS curves. Those are the only things I'm really interested in while I'm animating this character. Now that I've got my scene set up, my camera's placed, everything like that, I'm going to go File, Save Scene, and I'm going to go File, Save Scene As. I'm going to say, okay, V01. Now I'm ready to start animating. So the workflow, the goal here for the Seaweed Rig is you don't want something flailing around like a puppy tail. We want something that looks like it's underwater, that it's moving, it's undulating, it's staying fairly within the center of the frame, and that we're getting those interesting overlapping shapes like C curves, S curves, reverse C's, reverse S's, that ripple that flows from the base up to the tip. That's what we're trying to go for here. And the way to do that is actually fairly simple. It's you're going to animate one part of it, copy that curve to other parts, and then manipulate and offset it. Now, the other criterion of the assignment that if you've read it, you've probably noticed, is that it has to loop. It has to be a clean looping cycle over 48 frames. So one of the things that I do to make my job a little easier is I'm going to start on frame 0 because that means in a 48 frame from 0 to 48, the halfway point is an even number of 24. And so it makes the math a little easier for me to work out. And then halfway between that is 12. And then halfway between that is 6. And so it's very easy for me to add those keys and those breakdowns and keep track of where those keys should be. Now, I am only going to start on one piece at a time. And so I'm going to start by going to frame 0, just S to key, 48 S to key, 24 S to key, like that. And I'm going to go take a guess and say, okay, let's let the starting range here, I don't know, negative 20. And I also want to have that at the end frame. So I'm just going to middlemost drag to the end frame and hit S to key as well. And middlemost drag says, hey, I want to be at a different place in time, but I don't want anything to update its position. And that allows me to sort of copy information from one place to another. Now, 24, obviously I want it to be in the opposite range, 20, like that. And if I go here to my graph editor and I click on just that rotate Y, this is the curve I've got. Now it's important to note that the tangent handle here, see how it's flat here and it's flat here? That means that this cycle is going to loop smoothly. If I did something like this, I would have it sort of accelerating, going faster and faster and faster, get to the end of the scene, and suddenly it would stop hard and then ease out in the other direction, and so it wouldn't cycle smoothly. So it's important to be mindful with this kind of an animation where you're trying to do a looping cycle, that how it approaches the end of the loop matters at the beginning of the cycle. So if I go like this now and I just click, you see, okay, there we go. Initially, just waving back and forth, I got the first bit of animation. Good news. Now I'm going to show you a couple little tricks to make this job easier, because we're not just copying the animation, we're also offsetting those curves. And so I'm going to take this, double click on my timeline and go copy, to basically copy those 3 keys. And I'm also going to push this out here. So 92 frames. I'm going to make a second, or actually, sorry, 96 frames. Silly Dave, terrible at math. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to right click and go paste. And I'm going to paste a second loop like this. So even though we're only animating 48 frames, I'm going to have 2 loops of it. And that gives me this in the graph editor. 2 loops like that. The reason I'm doing that is because it's going to allow me to offset with that additional animation. So I'm going to go here on this curve. I'm going to go edit, copy, and then I'm going to grab the next control on the character and I'm going to go edit, paste. And so it's going to paste that same curve on the next controller. Now, if I just do that, you can see it just exaggerates the motion. And what I want is, I want, as the base is moving one way, the next part of the character is sort of trailing behind. And so it happens slightly afterwards. And so to do that, I'm going to go like this. I'm going to grab base, and then I'm going to go hit Q so manipulator's not in the way. And I'm going to go shift click. And then I just click on the word rotate Y here to isolate those curves. And I do that because you can see sync selection in graph editor. If I click on a name of a channel, because I have that checked on, it will isolate those channels. You can also do it by just going click rotate Y like that to isolate the curves you're interested in. And to make it a little easier, I'm going to take this curve here and I'm just going to offset it like this. So I'm going to go, okay, so there's one clean loop. And so now I'm back to working like this. I'm going to take my selection, my range slider here, and go 48, because this is the range that my animation actually takes place over. I've got longer space there, so I can offset these curves. So there I've got my curve, and I'm just going to offset it slightly. So I'm going to say, hey, you're actually going in the opposite direction like this, and then you change direction after this one changes direction. What does that look like? And now you can see the base is moving and the upper part is trailing behind just a little bit. And the nice thing is, because I did 2 copies of the loop, my tangent angle here, right there and right there, are exactly the same, which means it will loop cleanly. And that's why sort of doing 2 copies of the cycle and then pasting and offsetting is going to help me. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take that same curve data that's still in my paste buffer, and I'm going to go edit, paste, and the same thing, I'm going to start by just offsetting it 1 complete cycle. And then I'll say you'll be delayed even more. So if I go, there's you, there's you, there's you, I'm going to take his curves. And let's see, I'd offset the first one by, it looks like 19 or 15 frames there. So I'll offset the next one the same amount. I'm going to grab you and I'm going to say, oh, what? There you go. I'm going to say, so let's go, there's 15, and I'm going to go another 15 frames to frame 30, like that. So I'm going to go like that. So it's offsetting more. So now if I grab each of the keys together and then say, just show me the rotate Y, because this is the sort of thing you start to get. And lo and behold, if I do that, now you can see this whoosh, whoosh, like that, starting to get some sort of an overlapping action. And then I'm going to do the same thing to this guy. And here, I'm going to go edit, paste, because again, that curve is still in the copy paste buffer. Offset it. And I had done 30 frames offset on that next one. So he was like there, which means if I just keep offsetting the same amount, I'll go to another 15 frames, so all the way to 45 like this. There we go. And now I have 1, 2, 3, and whoops, let's get you out of the way. 4 like that. And there's all those curves offset. Let's see what that looks like. Not quite what I want. Let's try. I think I offset them too much. Let's go like this. Let's move them back a little bit like this. Let's see. So there the base is going. And then I want him offset like this. Let's see. So grab him and say, move you back a little bit more. Now to move these curves, I'm just selecting the curve itself, holding down Shift and middle mouse. Oh, that's interesting. It's not behaving. Let's try this again. You grab the curve. Yeah, there it is. And I'm going to go Shift. Oh, E. Oh, why are you not letting me move you? There we go. Okay. I guess my computer's just being a little unresponsive right now. What is going on there? So I can play around with those offsets because I want it basically that the base heads one direction and he trails behind. And then as he changes direction, this guy is changing direction and so on and so forth. And I just keep playing around with those offsets. See how that looks. Let's see. And so on and so forth. Now, that's one of the things I'll be playing around with. I'll be playing around with the offsets, and then I'll also be playing around with the amplitude. So for example, the range of motion on the base, 20 units or 20 degrees of rotation might be too large. So I might take this first one here and say, hey, you know what? Let's grab that rotate Y. And in fact, since I don't need any of these other keys, I can go like this. I can just select all those and go delete. So now the only thing I have is rotate Y on there. And I can do the same for the others, although I think in their case, I only have the rotate Y available. So keying those while I was pasting curves. So that's the only animation I've got. So I'm going to say this one here, I might want to tone him down a little bit. So I'm going to say, give me 80%. So I'm going to say asterisk equals 0.8. Whoops, didn't seem to record my keystrokes. Asterisk equals 0.8. Enter. And so you can see it scales that curve down. Now, the reason I don't just use scaling and squash it is because I need it to be symmetrical. I don't want it to be leaning too much to one side or the other, which means however much it goes in one direction on the other half of the cycle, I want it to go the exact same amount so it stays in the middle. So I'm going to reduce that base animation, the amplitude there. And you know what? I might reduce this one a little bit because the stuff that happens at the base amplifies as it goes. The lower down the base, the bigger an impact it has. So maybe smaller ranges at the base with bigger ranges up near the top will give me the look that I'm looking for. And so let's see, segment one, I'm going to say segment one, let's scale you down a little bit. Let's do 90% view. Asterisk equals 0.9. Whoops, why is it not going to recording my asterisk equals 0.9? There we go. There we go. Just tone it down just a teensy bit. And I'm going to just build slowly. Once I'm decide that, yes, I'm happy with the behavior of that, just using the minus key to change my manipulator handle size. Let's see, so it goes like this, and he's carrying along. And that's where, and so this guy, I'd still like him leaning back more. So I'm going to go like this and say, you know what, Go like this and offset you even more. E. God, my Maya is being crazy unresponsive today. There we go. That's better. Like that. There, that's getting more of that ripple. See that overlap like that. So I'm just looking at the base, this first one and second one. Not worrying about the tip right now. There we go. And then the tip, I want to offset a little bit more like this. I'm going to say, come on, you. There we go. There we go like that. Let's see. There we go. That's starting to get more in the range I want. But you know what? The tip isn't moving as much as I'd like. I think I'm actually going to scale that up a little bit. I'm going to say asterisk equals 1 point. No way on earth. Asterisk equals 1.2, like that. Enter. So I'm going to add 20% more amplitude at the tip. Now I can see it's getting quite far off the center line there. You can see it's reaching out really far. So if I play around with my curves, I might be able to get it more centered. So maybe it's a case of you need a bigger range. So like that. So I'm going to say swap with that buffer curve. Go back to your 100% version. And maybe I need to scale down a teensy bit more. So I'm going to say, now the other way I can do this, I can also say, let's say you in the positive range move 14, and then also in the negative range, negative 14. Now, all of these skills, shifting and offsetting curves in the graph editor, playing around with value operators to scale values, grabbing keys and shifting them as well. Hopefully, these are all skills that you already know how to do, using buffer curves to sort of see what the curve looked like before and what you had after, and being able to swap between them. All of this should be repetition for you. You've experienced this stuff before with the previous assignments that we've worked on. And I'm going to go like this and just say, hey, take a new buffer curve snapshot. Because what I've got so far is, oops, that swap buffer curve there, snapshot. So that's my current curve. And let's see, oh yeah, you know what, go edit, go copy, paste, just because, oops, that's interesting. Copy, I guess, paste. There you go. I just wanted two curves so I could see them together. Now, rather than having to manipulate these controls by going here in the viewport and grabbing them manually, I could also do the trick that I've done before where I make little buttons to select the character controls myself. I'm not going to bother doing that right now in the demo, but it's a huge workflow optimization to do so. And so I highly recommend it. So let's see here. I'm just going to go like this. And I'm just moving my graph editor out of the way for a second so I can see what I'm doing. Let's see here. Maybe if he was delayed just a little bit longer, so I'm going to go. So I'm grabbing that next one, saying just let's 1, 2, 3, add 3 more curves of delay. Let's see. See how that pulls him closer to the center line? Still a little wide. It feels less like seaweed because of the range that it's moving. So I think if I reduce the amplitude of some of these keys a bit more, I'll have something better. Let's do a wholesale. Just grab everybody together like this. And I'm just going to grab all these. And let's take a buffer curve snapshot. And then I'm going to say, I don't know, asterisk equals 0.8. Just give me 20% less motion on all of them and see how that looks. That's getting closer. It's getting closer. Hopefully, from watching me goof around here and manipulate it, you're starting to get a sense of how it is we generate this animation. I can revisit this, but I'd like to take some time and look at the work that folks have generated so far. But hopefully, the demonstration here is giving you an idea of what it is we're going for. And I don't want to get it perfect because as I say, then it just gives you a paint by numbers version of the assignment that you can follow. But hopefully this is close enough that gives you the idea of what it is we're going for. And trust me, you can get a result that looks like a piece of seaweed floating and drifting on an imaginary waves underwater. It's not waving around like a dog's tail. We're seeing those subtle C curves. So there's that C. We're seeing those S curves. See how it goes like this and like that. We're seeing those reverse C's, and we're seeing those reverse S shapes as well. Okay, so that's the kind of stuff we're looking for once it's completed. And you'll find that it doesn't operate much outside of a range, like, sort of stays within the center line mostly, the bulk of it. So any questions about what I've demonstrated so far? I'm going to stop my screen share.